Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk here with our new weekend broadcast. An Israeli startup has discovered that the sky is not the limit when it comes to developing new medical solutions. And believe it or not, the company is now working on a cure for cancer in space. The Israeli company called Space Pharma couldn't have a better name, because it's now involved in a $1.75 million project that uses research conducted in the Earth's atmosphere to develop new medications to combat cancer. The Blue and White team is working in partnership with bioscience engineering faculty and students from the New York SUNY Polytechnic Institute. Together, they'll launch a lab on a chip, meaning that cancer cells will be placed inside a microsatellite that orbits the Earth. The scientists will then study how the cancer cells behave in zero-gravity and microgravity environments, and the results could help develop new cancer drugs. The project is part of a new and growing field known as exomedicine, dedicated to the development of life science products in the galaxy's microgravity environment. This latest nanobioscience initiative is hoping that the more we know about cancer, the more quickly we can work to create new drugs to completely eradicate the often fatal disease. If you've ever dreamed of visiting the Garden of Eden, you may now be able to. An unusual agricultural project is underway in central Israel, and both Adam and Eve are involved. An ecological orchard is being planted in the Kramim neighborhood of Modi'in, with only edible greenery that includes trees, herbs, and plants. The project was launched in coordination with a nearby ecological farm called Chava and Adam, which is Hebrew for Adam and Eve. The idea behind the design is to create an edible forest rather than just flowers or shrubbery which are limited to only decorative purposes. Local residents and elementary school students have been on hand to help the Chava and Adam crew in establishing and maintaining this little Garden of Eden. Because the area is considered an open space communal garden, the public is even welcome to come and pick the produce for their own enjoyment. The Turkish president has just declared a state of emergency in Turkey, which will radically enhance his powers for the next 3 months. The cabinet and the president will now be able to bypass parliament when it comes to drafting new laws. And the international arena is expressing concern that the measure will undermine Turkey's democracy, law, and freedoms. But how will this week's events influence the Middle East as a whole? ILTV's Steve Leibowitz sat down with top Middle East analyst Dr. Jonathan Spyer to find out.
In terms of the region in general, I don't think things will change that much because, Erdogan was already pursuing a particular regional policy, which had changed quite significantly, I think, in recent months after the departure of Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu, a sense in which Erdogan was now seeking to reconcile with a number of powers with which he had become very much estranged. First of all, Russia, also Israel now. And there's a sense in which, from a foreign policy point of view, things will carry on pretty much the same. If Erdogan had lost power and the military had come to power, that would have been then probably a very great change in terms of Turkish regional policy. But as of now, Erdogan's firmly in the driving seat, so things will carry on pretty much as they were before, I think.
Now, they, of course, have a major role in Syria, which is their next-door neighbor. Millions of refugees have entered Turkey. It's the Air Force base, one of their bases, is being used by the Allies to attack. How do you think that will play out?
Well, my sense is that the rebellion in northern Syria, the Turkish-supported rebellion in northern Syria, is going through some very hard days. The Assad regime, with its Iranian and Hezbollah and Russian assistance, have just sealed off the last entry point into rebel-controlled eastern Aleppo, a place called the Castello Road. That had been a sort of 5-kilometer wide outlet for the rebels to bring in goods and ammunition and people into rebel-controlled eastern Aleppo. The regime has now closed it, which means that there is now a very real possibility of a long siege of eastern Aleppo in which there is around 300,000 people, most of them civilians, and a prospect for a real humanitarian problems. The Turks need to be concerned about this as well, of course, because what it could also lead to would be a departure of civilians in the direction of the Turkish border once again, in an attempt by refugees to enter Turkey. And Turkey's pretty much being clear it doesn't want any more Syrian refugees coming in. So, the rebellion that Turkey has supported from the outset is going through some hard days. I don't think it's finished yet. Turkey is supporting some very powerful military forces that are still there on the ground in northwestern Syria, but it's going through hard days indeed. And certainly the notion that the Turks had at the beginning of all this back in 2011, that they'll support these paramilitaries on the ground and they'll rapidly take down the Assad regime is pretty much off the agenda right now. The rebels are fighting a kind of war of survival, I would say.
You're known as an expert relating to the Kurds, and Certainly, there's no love lost between the Kurds and Erdogan. Were they actively, to your knowledge, supporting the notion of a coup against Erdogan?
I don't think so, because with the Kurds, it's not quite clear to any of us who exactly was responsible for this coup. The Turkish government is blaming the Gulen movement. But the Gulen movement, we know, is actually not that strong in the military. It's much stronger in the police and security services. So it's unlikely it was the Gulen movement. From a Kurdish point of view, the Kurds have no good memories of Turkish nationalist generals, which are probably the most likely ones, to have put forward this coup attempt. Kemalist nationalist generals. In many ways, when Erdogan first came to power, the Kurds were quite hopeful that an Islamic leader would maybe be more lenient with them than a strongly Turkish nationalist leader like we've seen in the past. Well, it turned out that he wasn't any more lenient. But, the Kurds wouldn't have any reason at all to see potential allies in nationalist Turkish generals coming to power via military coup. And if that was the most likely scenario of what took place on Friday, I don't think the Kurds would in any way be welcoming that or looking forward to that. It would bring, I think, new problems for them in a certain sense.
Do you think that, just as an observer of the situation, that the military leaders that were involved in this coup were kind of looking at the Egyptian model, hoping to have Morsi, like Morsi was deposed by the military and replaced by al-Sisi, that they would be able to replace Erdogan with a military government in that way?
Well, I think so. I mean, Turkey, of course, has seen military coups in the past, which in many ways do also resemble the coup that took place in Egypt on July 3rd, 2013. Obviously in 1960, I think 1971, 1980, again in 1997. There have been these coups in Turkey that follow a certain familiar pattern. So yeah, I'm sure that these generals, whoever they were seeing a bunch of people arrested. We'll perhaps find out eventually who really was behind this. Were thinking in those terms. However, what's interesting to note is that if they were thinking in those terms, looking at the levels of disorganization, the relatively small numbers of soldiers apparently involved, the basic mistakes made by the coup plotters. Indeed, we learned that at one time, two F-16 fighter jets under the control of rebel airmen had Erdogan's plane in its sight on its way to Istanbul and did not open fire. So there's a whole bunch of question marks about this. If they were thinking about the Sisi coup or earlier Turkish military coups, they really should have done a bit more studying of what those coups looked like, because it appears on the face of it they made some very, very basic errors in the pursuit of their own coup, which of course ended therefore in their own defeat.
Interesting times. Dr. Jonathan Spyer, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks.
Every driver dreads getting their car stolen, but that may no longer have to be a worry. A new Israeli company has found a groundbreaking way to search and find stolen vehicles by using drones. Until now, Israel's national security forces have been the only ones with access to the intelligence gained by security drones. Now, an Israeli company called Ituran has officially been authorized to deploy drones in its efforts to return stolen cars to their rightful owners. The authorization came after the car tracking and protection company showed what it can do by successfully trailing and then retrieving a stolen Israeli car from the West Bank Palestinian city of Tulkarem. Ituran employees used a drone to locate a stolen Buick LaCrosse in Tulkarem before entering the city with IDF forces. They loaded the car onto a tow truck and headed back to Israel to ultimately return the vehicle to its very grateful owners. It turns out drones can do a lot more than just locate stolen cars. They can also interrupt robbers attempting to carry out a theft by alerting law enforcement officers almost immediately. Such rapid response has been able to prevent several vehicles from crossing the border into the Palestinian territories, making it even easier to recover stolen property and capture the criminals. It looks like the new technique may already be having a positive effect, because so far this year car thefts have reportedly dropped by 19%. And now a warm welcome to Rabbi Tuvia Aronson, who will guide us through this week's Torah portion. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me back, and shalom to all the viewers out there.
So tell us about this week's Parsha.
Okay, so we have still about 2 more weeks where outside of Israel and inside of Israel we read different Torah portions. This week outside of Israel is Parashat Balak, which we started speaking about last week, and here in Israel, Parashat Pinchas. So in Balak, I had mentioned the whole story with Bilam, trying to curse the people, and then we were transforming curses into blessings, darkness into light. And not only that, but Darach Kochav miYaakov. The sages say, where is the source for a messianic era in the Torah? Where is the source for a Mashiach? And it's from this week's, from Balak. Darach Kochav miYaakov, a star will shine from the house of Jacob. And isn't that amazing that from the curses comes the ultimate blessing, the hope of the world redeemed, of peace and unity among all nations. Isn't that wonderful that from the curses come the ultimate blessing?
Absolutely. I mean, what kind of message does that send to us?
So that sends to us what we started to mention last week, that we can transform aspects of our lives from what we feel are difficulties or challenges or crises into opportunities for amazing, amazing growth. So that's in Balak. And we also have in Balak, Matovu Alecha Yaakov, how beautiful are your tents, Yaakov, which we mentioned was a lesson on unity and diversity, where the tents were facing away from each other. In other words, each person has their own perspective, but ultimately together it's one camp. So that's Parashat Balak. And then we move to Parashat Pinchas, where the Pinchas episode, I think, is a little bit beyond the scope of a few minutes, but if we had an hour and a half, there's a lot to say about that. But the rest of the parasha has what I think is an amazing, amazing model of different kinds of holiness. The first step is counting each and every person amongst the people of Israel. Everybody counts. Everybody is special. Everybody is a star. We say in the Psalms that every person is counted as a superstar. And Rabbi Nachman talks about this as well, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, that each and every person has good points. And if we look at each other and try to find the good points, we can let that inner superstar shine forth. So that's one, the holiness of people. And then the people begin to prepare for dividing the land into tribal portions. So we have holiness of space. And there, the daughters of Tzlofchad say, what about us? We want also a portion in the land of Israel. And they also get a piece of the land, a segment of the land. And so there's holiness of people, holiness of place, and then we have all the holidays, the holiness of time. And the holiness of time, the holiness of people, and the holiness of place is not to say that only certain people, certain leaders are holy and the rest of the people are not. It's supposed to say that by having leaders and models of what powerful leadership character attributes, what does that entail? What we have from that is we have each and every one of us becoming more powerful in our own right. And when we say that we have a holy space, that makes all the other spaces sacred as well, in a certain sense. That for example, the light of the Beit HaMikdash that we're thinking about in this time of year, it shines outward towards the whole world. And then finally, the holiness of time. We have holidays, we have Shabbat, we have new moon, Rosh Chodesh. That doesn't mean every single day of the week is not important. Every day is holy, every day is sacred, every day is special, every day has its own unique lights. But we have sacred moments that inform and inspire all of our other time frames.
So now, how can we take all of these lessons and incorporate them into our daily lives?
So I think that, first of all, I think it's so important that we all need to know how special we are, as each and every individual soul is just a superstar. We're all shining. We're all amazingly complex and deep beings. And also our spaces, our homes, our communities, our national land, and all the natural systems in the world. We have sacred space, but that doesn't mean that only our special place is holy. Everywhere is holy. And then the same thing with time. Having the Torah portion of Pinchas teaching us about the cycle of holidays, it informs us to say that every moment is special. Without the 6 days of the work week, we don't have Shabbat. Without the waxing and waning of the moon, we don't have Rosh Chodesh. And without the seasons, we don't have the different holidays.
Wow, that's beautiful. Is there anything else that you want to add about this parasha?
Well, I just want to say that we're about to enter into the 3 weeks, what's called Ben HaMitzarim, between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av, which is a time of right now, it's a time of mourning for the people of Israel, but eventually will be a time of great light and great hope, great celebration even. And what I think is important is that each and every one of us, we search for those good points in ourselves, in the places around us, in our time, in our daily routines, looking for the nekudot tovot, the good points of light, and let those points shine forth. And from that little points of light, from little stars, we have galaxies, we have supernovas, we have unbelievable opportunities for health and happiness and holiness for each and every one of us.
Stay positive, right?
Okay.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you
Shabbat
so much
shalom
for
to
coming
you
in.
and to everybody out there, and thank you very much.
All right, everybody, that's it for today's show. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to check out our morning update on Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching, and Shabbat Shalom.